Hi everybody, very nice of you to come and for us to honor Mendelson Joe. And there are many people that agreed to play or speak, and I hope we fit everybody in correctly. And so the MC for this evening is Jaymz Bee. Here, Jaymz, why don't you take it away?
Me. Well, hello. All right. How about raising a glass, said Joe, to the memory of Joe? They say may his memory be a blessing, and then some. I mean, there's so much art still in the world because of him, and so many of us have been inspired. I did want to give you a little bit of the laying of the land here. What we've done is we've got a few people making toasts, we've got a few people singing Joe songs, and we're going to try to keep it tight, because then we want to have time to actually talk together and exchange stories. So we're going to try to move this along quickly. Excuse me if my intros aren't as long as when I worked for the TD Toronto Jazz Festival. You'll probably be grateful, actually. Let's kick things off with Rusty Mccarthy. Where are you, my friend? Maya Bannerman. We're gonna start off with a Joe song. And I will find a slide and hold it there for you, so you have some nice Joe artwork to sing for.
I had a lovely moment today. I went for lunch at Annapurna restaurant, and my mom is a disciple there, and that's one of the things she and Joe had in common. And I told the disciples why I was in town, and they send their blessings, and they also gave me blessings to pass to you, and some stories about Joe, and they gave me Joe's, the recipe for Joe's favorite cookies, date cookies, so I'm going to try and make them and then deliver them to you. So, now Joe said this song is, said, hokey dokey. I don't know, I never thought that.
Pretty.
No. Let's play it now.
We have a couple of great drummers that are going to sit in. We got no kit, but we got Randall Coriel, Bruce Moffat. They've been reduced to shaker and clave.
I feel good inside. You make me feel right, as opposed to wrong. When you do what you do, you make me write this song.
I feel you, I feel clean through all that is me, all that is you.
You make me tap my foot, you make me take a good look. When you do what you do, I feel a healing inside. When you do what you do, what you do, I feel free inside.
I feel you. I feel clean through. All that is me. All that is you.
You make me laugh, and you make me sigh. When you do what you do, what you do, I feel good inside.
What you do, what you do.
You make me feel right,
What you do,
as opposed to wrong.
what you do, what you do.
You make me stomp my foot.
What you do, what you do.
You made me write this song.
What you do, what you do.
When you do what you do, what you do. When you do what you do, what you do. When you do what you do, what you do, I feel free inside. Oh yeah.
Okay, we have a long show.
Come on, baby. Don't say maybe. We're gonna eat pizza and dance to Tony Quarington. I'll be the swan. Prince, we'll fall in love. Oh, wrong swan lane. Come on, dance with Joe.
Don't be a soul.
Oh, toe to toe. Come on, dance with Joe. There are no water skiers on Swan Lake. Just romance. May I have a dance? Come dance with Joe. Don't be a soul. From toe to toe. Come dance with Joe. Come on, baby. Don't say baby. I'm waiting for you. It's driving me crazy. Come dance with Joe. Don't be a smoke. Go toe to toe. Come on, dance with Joe. Come dance with Joe. Don't be a smoke. Go toe to toe. Come on, dance with Joe. Go toe to toe. Thank you.
That was so much fun, and I'm glad that second song, we have to have that at a show for Joe. A round of applause for Bobby Wiseman, our musical director, because he put this thing together. And Bad James, they were down for 2 songs. Everyone else is down for 1, but I didn't. So, okay. Wow, we are going to hear from someone incredible, a prolific, brilliant artist. Please welcome Hansen to the microphone.
Can I use this?
Yeah, absolutely. This is your better.
What possesses people to want to be on stage? It's terrifying. I'd like to thank Bob Wiseman, Jaymz Bee, and Michal, Hásek, and of course Karen Robinson and friends for organizing this remembrance for Mendelson Joe. On the phone a few days before Joe died, he cracked me up by announcing about himself. I'm not everyone's cup of tea.
No kidding.
If there was ever anyone who isn't everyone's cup of tea, it's Mendelson Joe. He's not exactly the embodiment of how to win friends and influence people. But what a profound and warm effect he had on everyone here. At the top of the list is Joe's partner, Karen Robinson.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
In the obituaries written by the male-dominated media, they neglected to honor Karen's loving role in Joe's life for almost 25 years. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. Karen started representing Joe professionally in 1998 and is every bit an artist herself. Joe often expressed to me his awe of Karen's dedication to her job as an art therapist for troubled children and families. I witnessed from afar Karen and Joe's courage and deathbed humor leading up to Joe's end of life by medical assistance in dying on February 7th. He was chomping at the bit for Maid. Had Joe lived to tell the tale, he would say that Maid saved his life. Mendelson Joe was a purpose-built guy, a man on a mission. He was making art, playing guitar, firing off letters to the editor, writing postcards to politicians, fighting injustice, protesting, or supporting somebody supporting a cause. Around 1984, a Joe fan who I knew arranged for us to visit Joe's cluttered studio at 138 Ossington. I can't remember if I knew about his music or the kind of art he did, but his name was familiar in the letters to the editors columns. When I told Joe that I was a secretary at the U of T, he asked if I would do some memoir typing for him in exchange for art. I happily accepted. I got to learn all about Joe, the hunger strike he had been on to protest the Darlington nuke, the people he associated with, and his pet peeves. Once you enter the world of Mendelson Joe, there's no turning back. You will never be normal again. I don't remember how it happened, but Joe encouraged me to paint. I've never stopped. He was my biggest champion over the decades. Those here tonight have similar stories of Joe's generosity of spirit and resources. Joe came to be my best Toronto friend throughout the 1990s. Not a halfway person, he was intensely loyal to those he included in his life. Joe didn't suffer cynics, fence-sitters, people of inaction. He had no use for racists, sycophants, liars, hypocrites, dinner parties, or meetings. Organized religion, the God Squad, was intolerable. For every act of greed, every lie, or outbreak of fascism that outraged him, Joe found an antidote in art, music, landscapes, and women. Men, not so much, but there were individual men he held in high regard. Joe was quick to praise work well done, whether it was a poem, firefighting, indigenous beadwork, building a cabinet, or running an animal shelter. He was in love with competence, clear enunciation, and punctuality. I hope that Joe's motto, that the only good artist is a dead artist, will be proven true. His art needs to be showcased in Canada's national galleries.
Yeah.
Along with the group of seven. Along with Maud Lewis. Along with William Kurelek and Kent Monkman. Nearing his death, Joe sadly lamented, "I am not me anymore." I was reluctantly getting that impression too, that he was less and less Mendelson Joe. He no longer spoke about corrupt politicians. You know there's something wrong if Mendelson Joe isn't spouting off at the mouth or the paintbrush about lying politicians. He knew he was running out of gas. I last saw him at his home in 2018. It was one of a handful of visits after I moved to BC. I was alarmed at how frail he had become. Joe and I lived provinces away from each other, but would speak on the phone once a week or so until the end. He always asked if I was painting, and please always wear your bike helmet. What good fortune I had to enjoy almost 40 years of friendship with Mendelson Joe. It's as good as having known Emily Carr.
I'm sure this is going to happen all night long. You reminded me of something very funny. I just did a short film, and I made sure I had Joe Hall's On the Avenue CD in one of the scenes, because Mendelson Joe did it. And on every scene, I had a different bicycle with a different colored helmet. And someone in Kensington Market said Joe would approve of you, because I had 8 different helmets. Safety and health first. That was another one. Hey, you're ready. Okay, you already know her, but I'll tell you. It's Gwen Swick.
I loved singing on this song so long ago when Joe recorded it. I sang some backup vocals. And rehearsing it now, I've just fallen more and more in love with it, as I did with him. I loved his paintings, I loved his songs, I just loved him. And I loved his energy, and just a beautiful, beautiful man.
I'm living alone, cooking alone, we're learning to savor, we're learning to treasure. I'm just threading the needle and facing the mirror, we're learning existence and the dawning of distance
as you know, Joe was so seriously into so many good causes, things that had to be fixed. Artists Against Racism was one of the biggest. So Lisa Cherniak, come on up, and we're going to have a word from Lisa from Artists Against Racism. The one close to you.
I'm a little short here. I'll try to make a long story short, but it's going to be a bit difficult. Yesterday, sometimes when I met Joe in the early 90s, and we, is it getting feedback?
Oh, you have to be close to the mic.
Was that better?
Then you can turn it down.
Okay, thanks. Oh, thank you. Okay. Okay. I don't sing, so I'm not used to this. Yeah, usually when people die who are close to me, they either come in my dreams or they send me some other sign, and or they like whisper something in my ear. And yesterday I saw a man that looked exactly like Joe walking down the street when I was walking my dog, and then he had paint all over his pants. I'm thinking, okay, this is a sign. He's showing me he's still watching over me. And I wasn't looking for it, so it was quite odd, but it was really comforting seeing that, because he hadn't come in one of my dreams yet. So, and it reminded me of the first time I met Joe was when I was working on the Shirley Show. I just left university, and I got this job in the green room at the Shirley Show. And so back there we'd have to give, drinks and food to all the celebrities that came in, and I'd been there for a few weeks, and then one day this guy comes in with like these coveralls with paint all over them, and of course it's sleeveless and they're like shorts, and he just like stumbles in and brings his girlfriend, and he just grumbles at everybody and wouldn't talk to them. And I'm thinking, who is this guy? Why is he here? And I just thought, okay, I'm not going to go near him. I'm just going to let other people deal with him, because he didn't seem to want to talk to anybody. So I just watched, and I think Shirley actually told people she'll deal with him. She'll just give him all the food herself. And so I just went in the audience and watched, and he sang, and I thought, how come I've never heard of this guy? And then a couple years later, it's kind of funny because whenever we resist something, it always comes back into our life. So a couple years later, there was the, you probably remember in around 1990 when the Holocaust, there's a famous Holocaust denier, David Irving. He was trying to come into the country, and I can't remember who the prime minister was at the time, but they were going to let him in. And I had just left, I just graduated from University of Guelph, where there was a lot of anti-Semitism because it was a small university, small town, and I never experienced it in Toronto. And so I put up with it there, and I never said anything. And except for one time when I worked at the Woodbine racetrack with a Jewish vet, and a guy there, one of the barn guys, threatened his life. So I wrote a whole article on that, and how I went on a bike trip after high school, and we visited a concentration camp, and we went through there, and just watched kids running around and laughing and eating ice cream. And I just wrote this whole article and how I never spoke out before against anti-Semitism, even when it was directed at me in university. And then finally I spoke out at the Woodbine racetrack, and hopefully saved this vet's life. And so I wrote this article, which I have here. If anyone wants a copy, they can have one. And so Joe responded to the article and sent me a letter, and it was the days before the internet, so I get this letter in the mail with his phone number in the bottom, and it was all colorful, and I thought, well, this is cool. This guy wrote me a letter thanking me, because I got a few hate letters too. And and then I thought, oh, that was Mendelson Joe, the guy who was on the Shirley Show. He's not such a bad guy. And then I just thought, okay, maybe I'll just call him and thank him for the letter. And so I gave him a call and thanked him. And during that time, I'd switched jobs, and I was working at Bowden's Media Monitoring, where you watch the news every day and monitor what's going on. And you might recall in the early 90s when there were the white supremacist groups, like the Heritage Front, they were recruiting youth in schools and pamphleting the schools, and I was watching this day in and day out. And I always wanted to do something about racism, and I couldn't watch what was going on anymore without doing anything. And I decided that if we did like a poster and got it on all the schools with all these famous artists' names, then people would, kids would look to these artists rather than people they've never heard of who are pamphleting their schools. And so I thought, who's going to do the artwork? Because if I do the artwork, like nobody's gonna sign up. So I just thought of Joe that night. I was just thinking at 4 in the morning, what can I do about this? And then I called him the next day and asked him if he minds doing the artwork. And of course he jumped right on board. He goes, sure. And I think I actually told him what to draw on it, like people standing on a globe, which is kind of typical, but I asked him if he could paint that, and he goes, nobody ever tells me what to paint. For you, I'll do it. And then, so we go on, he does the painting, and he actually, then he gave me $300, I had like no money. And ironically, I also got an accident being hit by a car while I was kind of jaywalking in St. Clair trying to organize this project, and then we got laid off, and I thought, I can just get EI while I'm working on this, and I'm just going to spend the next year working on this. So he gave me $300, gave me his fax machine, and then he signed up Peart and Ralphie and Bob Wiseman, who, thank you, Bob. I'll never forget that. And so he signed up these people, and then he gave me his address book with every celebrity he could think of and said, here, you can do the rest, and because I got to do some painting, and so go after them. So there was only one person that got upset that I had their home address, but it was amazing. He gave me all of that, and then there's one other person on the painting who we had to have a Jewish person in there, so this guy looked like he needed a kippah, so I said, Joe, do you mind painting a kippah on his hat? And he goes, nobody ever tells me what to do, but okay, I'll listen to you. And I didn't know Joe very well, so I didn't know that nobody ever told him, so I'm like, and I didn't want to bug him too much, but it was pretty funny. So we did that. It took me another 3 years to get enough artists. One summer he was camping up north, and some famous country artist who I won't name, it's in his book, he wanted to, his manager said he's not going to join our campaign because the white people created this country and the white race is going extinct. All right. So Joe's up north camping and thinking, what would Joe do? And so I was going to call the Globe and Mail, and I'm like, okay, I've got to get more artists on board. Nobody knows about this, and not all these letters are working to people. So the woman in the Globe and Mail checked with the guy, and his manager confirmed it. And I was having a heart attack because I thought he wouldn't. And then the next day it gets on the front page of the Globe and Mail Entertainment section, and Margaret Atwood and all these Pierre Berger and all these artists sign up. And so Joe comes back from his camping trip, and I'm like, well, you won't believe what I did. I just thought of you. And so I told him, and he goes, you've got big ovaries. And that was his phrase. So that was pretty funny. And I'm just going to read this excerpt from his book so you can hear him in his own words. And I always wanted a book dedicated to me, and he actually dedicated to me and Lisa Simpson from The Simpsons, and June Callwood. So this is one of my greatest achievements, is getting a book dedicated by Mendelson Joe, and then he signed it. So I'll just read this brief part up here because it's kind of funny, even though I forgot my reading glasses. He goes, in 1992, Lisa Cherniak wrote an article in the Globe and Mail about racism, and I read it, and I thought she did a good job, so I wrote and encouraged her. As a result, we met. She's a freelancer, she's in her mid-30s, but she sounds like a 12-year-old if you talk to her. And if you met her, she looks like a 12-year-old. But she's got the heart of an angel, and she's got giant ovaries. They must be hundreds of pounds each. She's a very sweet, driven, smart woman. She had an idea to make an organization to fight racism. Then he goes on, and then he goes, yeah, she did all the work. All I did was tell her how to do stuff like how to manipulate assholes, to embarrass them into doing what you want them to do. And then he goes, I was sort of like the director of her energies. I started off by giving her money and connecting her with powerful people who would give her money. I knew a lot of other people who are pop stars who I thought might support AAR by lending their names to it and making donations. Some of them did. And then he goes, yeah, and then he tells about the supporters he got, like Neil Peart, and then he goes on. It's just so funny. So I'm just very lucky that it's just serendipitous how I met up with him, and I believe in serendipity, and it's almost surreal that all this happened. And I just wish we had $1 million organization, which would be his dream. And the last letter he sent me was, I guess, a couple weeks before he died, and so he's got a picture of him with a painting of himself, and then it says health on the back. And all his letters to me, I collected all of them, all the letters to me say health or eat your greens, and I haven't been too healthy since I knew him with it because I have environmental illness, and he's always tried to get me to eat properly. And so I'm going to remember him for that also. And actually, whenever I go to eat my greens or I eat well, I just think of Joe. And so he's there in my mind every day.
That was so sweet. We are actually going to help raise a little more money for Artists Against Racism. So there is going to be a tip jar kind of passing through here if you'd make a small donation. I want to do a round of applause for this place, for Tranzac. Round of applause. I guess it's a coincidence. I don't know if it is, but Joe Hall, he had his tribute to life right here as well. And Mendelson Joe made the Joe Hall album cover on the Avenue, one of the greatest Canadian records ever made in the history of music. So Tranzac gave the rental of this room much cheaper because they love Joe as well. So aside from a few little costs, the money is going to go to Artists Against Racism. So if you don't mind putting something in the tip jar when it comes your way, that would be wonderful. Hey, how about getting Cathy Young up to the stage? She is going to do a Joe song, a great friend of Mendelson Joe. Oh, and a full band. We will be introducing you to the band as we go along. Oh, you want your own mic? Sure. Here, yeah. Do this. Okay, sure. I'm going to change the mic here.
Let him change in your undies and on stage. Hi, everybody. Why am I talking?
Hi, Cathy.
Yeah, we're going to fix that up in a sec.
Oh, we're getting there. Good looking crowd. Yeah. You know, I met Joe Mendelson in the, I guess 70, when he was with Mainline, 69, 70. I had my Mainline t-shirt. They were a great band. Rock Pile. Awesome. I saw you there. Yeah, it was you, I thought so. We went on a diet for 2 weeks. He was like my big brother, you know. I felt safe with him. As a woman at that time, young girl, he treated me as an equal. And what a rarity that was. He was rough. He was rough and tumble. but he had a heart like a lion. And we lasted 2 weeks on the diet, and nobody ever mentioned anything after that. So, Joe, they broke the mold when they made you. So I'm doing this song for you. It's called Lick and Sniff.
All right.
Get up each morning, I work real hard to paint this painting about the way the world is, the way the world is. Right this way, it's easy. Get that watercress, think of you. Yes, I think of you. Lick and sniff. Want you love like a mango, like a mango. Lick and sniff. Want you love like a mango, like a mango. That was so good. I like that. Do that. It's all mine. At least it's my mind. Love is freedom. She makes me hungry. Makes me hungry. Lick and sniff. Want to love. You know it now. Come on. It's I can mango. I can mango. Can't hear you. I lick and sniff. Want to love. I can mango. I can mango. Where'd you go? And I play this guitar, and I make some magic, 'cause it sounds like this. I am the doctor. Yes, you were, Chuck. I am the doctor. Lick and sniff. The one you love. I can make. I can make. Lick and sniff. The one you love. That was good, Joe. I can make. I can mango. Thank you so much.
Cathy, thank you. Richard Underhill, you were playing on the original song. Do you have a story about Joe you want to share?
Yes, thank you, James. Kathy, amazing. Aw, thank you.
Thank you, boys. How about a hand for the band?
What a pleasure and an honor it is to be here. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Bobby, for organizing the band. And I just want to bring you back to mid-70s, Salmon Arm, BC. Small town, 15,000 people. Young man who perhaps stands out from the rest or is a little weird or awkward, scouts the dial, the radio, and finds the big R, Salmon Arm, home of the country and the western.
And a little bit over to the left, no doubt, was CBC. And late one night on CBC with the headphones, I heard, Hollywood would you be my friend? Holly Weird. And it was Mendelson Joe from Toronto. And this weird character, he changed his name from Joe Mendelson to Mendelson Joe, so he got his government mail the right way. Oh, that's good. That's a weird guy. I like that. Because I'm a bit of a weirdo too. Okay, cool. Maybe I should move to Toronto. So later on, the kid moves to Toronto and he plays in the street and he's got this crazy band and the crazy band needs a bio. And so he makes up a bio for all the band members, getting everything completely wrong. Except for himself, who's like John Coltrane, Eric Dolphy, Mendelson Joe. And that's in his influences section. So then, one day CBC calls this band, the Shelter Demons, up and says, we want to do this crazy thing, it's a little rehearsal of you guys, and that would be fun. Okay, yeah, any kind of promo. And so we're doing the rehearsal, and this guy walks in and they say, look who it is, it's one of your incredibly favorite influences of everyone in the band. And the band were like, who's that guy? And I was like, I'm not sure, but it could be Mendelson Joe? And he said, yes, you're my favorite person ever. And oh yes, Mendelson Joe, amazing. So then he played his legs. Well, he played rhythm on his legs. And my mom was like, who is that big guy playing his legs in the CBC thing that your band had? But that was Mendelson Joe. And then he called us one day out of the blue. So thank you, CBC. Thank you, Public Radio, for joining us together. And we had just an amazing time recording this beautiful music. And we got to meet him. We got to hang out with him and hear his beautiful truth bombs all the time. And it made us feel wonderful. So thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, CBC.
Sorry. Ace of spades. Sorry. That was a Motorhead for me. Is there a doctor in the house? Oh, yes, there is. Hey, come on up. This is Dr. Phillip Berger.
Wow. So good evening, and thank you to Bob Wiseman and the organizers for inviting me to speak. My name is Phillip Berger. My tribute to Joe will last 6 minutes and 55 seconds. For those of you who are bored and impatient. Joe liked the precision of time limits and appointment times. You knew never to be late with Joe or exceed your allotted time to speak. I think I first met Joe in 1976, though he corrected me during one of our phone calls in the last 2 weeks of his life. He said 1975. I knew not to disagree with Joe. He was almost always right. At that time, I was dating his cousin who introduced me to Joe at the Manulife Center where he lived with his then wife, Flea. The image of a giant man lumbering towards me in a paint-splattered overall shorts outside in the middle of winter has stayed with me ever since. Typical of Joe, he was way ahead of his time. Now it is not unusual to see people, mostly men, wearing shorts in the winter. As to my girlfriend, Joe's cousin, well, suffice it to say I was more interested in his cousin than Joe was. He never bought into society's view of family, nor would he be shackled by it. The overused term chosen family applied to Joe more than almost anyone we can see to hear tonight. Joe was first in many domains. Many decades ago, I attended his concert at the Yorkville Bar in which he banned smoking. Never before had that happened in Toronto. The audience complied completely. They knew better than to defy Joe. One time we were dining at a Chinese restaurant on Baldwin Street. An unsuspecting person at a nearby table was smoking. Joe went over to them, looming large over their table, and firmly told them not to smoke near him. He then proceeded to butt out their cigarette lying in the ashtray. Joe then immediately went to the washroom to cleanse his hands, lighting another first. Joe is funny, very funny. Said with a mischievous smile, Joe once exclaimed that, and I quote, "My house is eccentric and filled with art, 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 art." And then he said, "I'm not a dog bark." Well, when I told him that I often quote him to friends and colleagues, he shot back, "Then tell him that you were quoting someone who makes sense." I was Joe's doctor for over 20 years until he moved to Emsdale. I tell this story with the consent of his wife, Karen. At Joe's request, I referred him to a psychiatrist. Joe wanted a professional opinion as to whether he was normal. That was the last and only time Joe saw a psychiatrist. He had been declared normal. Thereafter, whenever I asked him how he was, he would answer, "I am normal, thank you." Joe's many aphorisms conveyed eternal truths. Quote, "The idea is to get through the day to have dinner. The whole point is to have dinner." What a universalist proposition. Everyone on earth has to eat, and the rich person is no better or superior in that need than the poorest. Regarding the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, brought on by former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, who Joe detested, this is what Joe had to say. "Apathy is Canada's greatest natural resource. We should export that." Joe and I spoke about MAID. He said that he would not do it if the medicine I take made me happy. It would be different, but they do not. It is not a good trip. I'm going on a trip February 7th. It reminded me of the first song on McKenna Mendelson Mainline's epic album Stink, released in 1969. In a song called One Way Ticket, Joe sang in his wonderful bluesy voice about that trip. "I'm going to ramble till the day I die. I've got a one-way ticket. It's kill me by degrees." And regarding that one-way ticket through MAID, Joe declared, "So that is my party. I will cry if I want to." We both had a good weep several years ago when he first told me about his plans. When I told him that I need to think about his dying with MAID, he characteristically answered, if I can be of use to you, call me." Joe's expertise on music and melody extended from guitars to cars. He had an encyclopedic knowledge of cars, their specs, power, safety record, reliability, and consumer reports. Since the mid-1980s, I never bought a car without consulting Joe. Joe knew it all. Of course, he always accompanied his advice with affirmation of his self-described hypocrisy on driving any motor vehicle, but that never swayed me. Joe always believed in the resuscitative and mending power of art. As you know, his 2013 CD was titled "Art is a Healer." He created art and music free of any compromise. And Joe was the doctor of art. He often referred to himself as Dr. Joe. In 1984, he painted a scene in our backyard of my then 20-month-old daughter with her pants falling off, exposing the top half of her buttocks. The painting is hanging here tonight behind the bar. It is a seriously wonderful piece, tender, engaging, subtle, well composed. But Joe's primitive and endearing art was too sophisticated for the parochial taste of the Art Gallery of Ontario. I wrote the CEO of the AGO a number of years ago and asked him to consider showing Joe's art before he died. The CEO did not have the courtesy to respond. Please forgive my still lingering bitterness, but talk about snobbishness and elitism. Joe imparted advice about love. In the days before he died, he told me that love what you have today and make the most of it because you don't know what will happen tomorrow. Nobody did Joe love more, appreciate more deeply, have more trust for, and show stronger fidelity than to his wife, Karen. He repeatedly explained how lucky he was to have you, Karen, as his wife. So Joe, farewell my dear friend, my chaver, my brother.
So brilliant. Love that. This fella I met because of this. I can't believe we haven't met each other before, but we've been hanging out talking Joe for weeks now. Michal Hásek is going to sing a classic Mendelson Joe song. Michael Hásek, everybody.
So beautiful.
Good evening, folks. Joe's people, man. What a fucking honor. And Joe didn't like it when I swore. Oh my God. Joe didn't like a lot of things about me. I was born in July 1944. Germany fell and many people perished, millions. A little me, I was born free. I was born to cuddle, born to cuddle, born to cuddle. I was born. And 20 years later, 1964, I took to the stage, came out of my cage, still little me. I was born free, I was born to cuddle, born to cuddle, born to cuddle. I was born to cuddle like a factory animal, put on this planet to try to make things right. Man, I'm so honored to be here tonight. This is so exciting. These guys, can you fucking believe these? Sorry, Joe. Vezi. The incredible George Koller. Like this guy's one of the. Last time I saw him play, he was backing Dr. John. Mr. Quarington on guitar. I've never played with these guys. And this sax player, holy mackerel, what a tone. And the stuff he did on Joe's album. And of course, Mr. Bobby Wiseman. Sometimes not so wise. Then, 20 years later, 1984, George Orwell's prediction came true, and holy fuck, so much more. Not little me, I was born free, I was born to cuddle, born to cuddle, born to cuddle, I was born.
There's still room for two on the dance floor. Let's hear it for this improv amazing band. You know, when you introduced the band, I thought you were going to say, Rich, that's Vezi. You're going to introduce them to each other, but they know each other. You're new. That's great. That was fun. Hey, you know what? There's only one single politician invited here because it was she was Joe's favorite. And Kurt Swinghammer and so many great artists. Barbara Hall, one of the great mayors of Toronto that we've ever had. And a great friend of Joe Hall is going to say a word.
Thanks, Jaymz. And thank you, Karen, for giving me the privilege of being here tonight and sharing a few words about our friend. This is your his family, his community. And one of the exciting things, I think, is that everything I've heard here tonight has been consistent with everything else. Joe was a person who was who he was in every situation, in his art, in his activism, in his relationships and friendships. We've heard a little bit about how Joe was not a big fan of politicians. I used to read some of the letters to the editor, and then one day in my office, a large envelope was brought to me, name, mayor, blah, blah, all written in felt pen, big felt pen. I think one of the envelopes was a recycled one. They were taped together and, private, personal, only open by, and whatever. So I wasn't quite sure what would be in this. Anyway, I opened it. I think maybe a staffer standing by, just to be safe, and out fell a little painting, a little just on a piece of paper, a painting, and a letter from this person who I always heard or saw writing angry, angry letters to the editor, congratulating me on the smoking bylaw. When it was introduced in council, it was the only time in my 12 years in council as a councillor and then as mayor that the police had to be called to calm down the crowd and carry some people out. It was a tough issue at the time, an important public health issue, and we got a lot of angry mail. Luckily, pre-email and social media, so it was all in the form of letters, and they were mostly very angry. Joe wrote a very positive letter, and thus began a relationship through letters. And we forget about how meaningful handwritten letters can be. And I think Joe had relationships, friendships with many people through letters. And that was certainly something that we had primarily. Another time I can remember a letter after the Mayor's Committee on, it was called the Mayor's Committee on Race Relations, and it was me who signed it as mayor, filed a complaint against Ernst Zundel for hate. It was Holocaust denial on the internet, and it was the first case that was brought on hate on the internet, and a lot at the Canadian Human Rights Commission, and all kinds of issues around jurisdiction and how could you tell if it was the internet, where did the crime occur. And so this, in fact, we were ultimately successful, but Joe sent many letters during that process. So he knew how to use his pen and his art for political activism. And we heard in the I Love to Cuddle about how important it was for him to cuddle, but to work hard to make change. And he certainly was, I would say, an ideal citizen activist for democracy. So many issues he would write to me about, and they'd all come in these crazy envelopes. And you know, in politics you got a lot of crazy envelopes. And you know, like the time I got a big one, and from somebody who was taking me to the UN for, this was actually a person of Maltese ancestry who was taking me to the UN Human Rights Tribunal because we had limited the number of rabbits that people could have. This was a public health. Somebody had 300 rabbits in their backyard in a small house, and they were raising them for food because rabbit is the national dish of Maltese. And so somebody was upset. And I mean, those were the kinds of letters we would often get in these big, but not Joe's. Joe's were always long. Yes, they were long, but they were always a work of art. They were so intelligent, so smart, so to the point, and thanking and encouraging and pushing where else you might go, that kind of thing. So we developed a very positive relationship. But then he called me one day and asked if I would come and sit for a painting, for a portrait. And I had heard a lot about his portraits of politicians. And I'm a fairly easygoing kind of person, and I thought things had developed well in our communications, but I really wasn't sure. And I guess he picked that up in my hesitation in the conversation, because he said, no, don't worry about that. This is the real thing. I'm inviting you. I never asked any of them to sit. And you're a woman, and I'm doing a series of portraits of women and whatever. So I went. I didn't know Dr. Phil about his obsession with time. But once you said that, I recalled that he told me before I came exactly how long it would take. And I thought, well, that's sort of strange. I would think if you were painting a portrait, it would depend on, how much white was just in the hair, or how long to. How could you know that in an hour and a quarter, it would be done? It was done. And I sort of like it. In fact, I've looked at it a couple of times in the past couple of weeks since Joe passed, and I like it better now. He did do a series of portraits of women, and Joe was a feminist, and he sometimes wrote letters to me when I became head of the Ontario Human Rights Commission. Of course, a lot of issues there that were important to him that he would write about, and certainly some of them related to discrimination and women. But what a wonderful group to be a part of. the people the women, some of the women he valued: Doris Anderson, June Callwood, Margaret Lawrence, Margaret Atwood, Irshad Manji, Sylvia Tyson. What a wonderful group of women he cared about, he respected, he saw as important women. So for me, it's an enormous honor that he invited me to be a part of that. So thinking about him today, you know how some of his last comments were that he was glad he was Canadian, that he was free in Canada. He cared about the fact that that Made was possible for him in Canada. There were many things about our country of which he was critical and that he didn't like, but he cared about the country. And as a result, part of his work and his art was communicating the kind of change, the kind of country that should be. And when we look at his landscapes, you can see how much he loved this country. And Philip, maybe a whole pile of us should write to the AGO. Yes. Thank you, Joe, for helping us keep our democracy. For the state, we're going to need all of you and a lot more people to take that role on, because it is vulnerable. Thank you.
I'm privy to a little information. I happen to know a couple of people from the AGO were invited here, so if you're here, we love you, and you can come and introduce yourself to me afterwards quietly, and we'll make a plan. That's the way forward. Hey, how about this band? That's Vezi Tayyeb from Kensington Sound. I gotta say, you've got, I don't know, 4 or 5 Mendelson Joe paintings in your beautiful lounge. And that's because...
Tell them about his book.
He's written an amazing book. Vezi's written an amazing book about those early days. Mendelson Joe would come up and give you paintings and say, you gotta help this musician, you gotta help this musician, record this album. And so you got a whole bunch of art and no money, but you love that art, so that's all good. And that's George Koller. You've met him already. Great friend. And now we're gonna get a song, I believe, from the one and only Tony Quarington, everybody.
Okay. Is the mic on? Okay. Give me a little more monitor because I'm far away from the monitors. So, Mendelson Joe is a very interesting guy, but I don't need to tell you that. We used to be sort of neighbors for a little while, and I was walking down the street one day on Ossington, and I waved at him, and he corralled me, and he said, "Tony, you've betrayed your art." Well, and it turned out that what he was thinking was that I had played too many notes on the Joe Hall Direct to the Lead album. And he was probably right, you know, that was my Eddie Van Halen period. And then about 15 years later, he saw something I did on TVO, and he wrote me a very nice letter about it. So he was that kind of a guy. Richard Underhill alluded to a song, "A Hollywood Be My Friend," and that's the song that I'm going to sing. And I picked it because of the anchovies in it. Because I was once on a short little tour with Joe and Joe Hall and Jesse Winchester, and it fell out that it was Mendelson Joe's birthday, and he was always in this song talking about a pizza with anchovies, and sometimes if he got really ebullient, he'd say, "Triple anchovies." So for his birthday, we ordered a triple anchovy pizza, and we ate it, and it actually was pretty darn good. Well, I was walking down Vine Market Street, taking my time. I was eating avocado and it tasted just fine. Hollywood, would you be my friend? I'm so lonely I cannot pretend. Oh, Hollywood, Hollywood, would you? Hollywood, would you? Hollywood, would you be my friend? Hollywood, be my friend. There's Kentucky Fried Chicken and chili dogs too. I think I'll have a taco. No, a pizza will do. A pizza will do. With anchovies too. I'm so lonely I don't know what to do. But Hollywood, 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 you Hollywood, Hollywood, would you? Hollywood, would you be my friend? Oh, Hollywood, be my friend. There's a 57 Chevy and it sounds real heavy. A candy apple Honda makes me think of Rhonda. But Hollywood, would you be my friend? I'm so lonely I cannot pretend. Oh, Hollywood, Hollywood, would you be my Hollywood? Would you be my Hollywood? Hollywood, would you be my friend? Oh, Hollywood, be my friend.
Thank you, Tony Q. Coming up next, we've heard from his doctor. How about his publisher, Jack David, ECW Press? Come on up. Man, Barry Average, Hásek Workman, Robert Priest, M. Griner. You have a lot of good books out there. Thank you. Hey.
Right.
Tony and I were in Bob Kluwett's class at York in 1970.
Something.
5, maybe. Haven't seen him since then.
That's funny.
I met Joe when he was going out with a friend of mine, Georgia Watterson. My wife decided to invite him over for dinner, so he did occasionally go to a dinner party. He was quite respectable and unusual. We got to know each other a bit. He found out that I was publishing books. And he said, would you mind if I sent you something? And I said, sure. So he sent me a rough manuscript, A Man and His Penis. And I wrote him back and I said, Joe, it's a great story, but you can't write worse shit. And from that point on, he was my favorite guy. He loved that somebody told him what he thought was the truth. I didn't know how it was going to go over, but it did. We mostly communicated by phone, and the phone calls often began with, how are you feeling? But he really meant it. It wasn't bullshit, it was the real thing. And I would explain to him, and he would ask me if I had any ailments, whatever was going on. And then we began to talk about his books, his potential books. And I signed up somebody, Nadia Halim, to actually write his biography. Because I knew Joe may not have done the best possible job. And she did. She did a great job, interviewed a lot of people. And the book's out of print, for those of you who are curious. And then we began to talk about doing his artwork. He only had a couple of issues about the artwork. One, big type. Thick paper. As long as we had thick paper and big type, he was fine. We found that the artwork had to be treated gently, but he didn't care. He would have sent us a photo of a photo. And then we would have scanned it, and we would be fine with that. He wasn't really nitpicky about the quality as long as the image was reproduced. And in our phone calls, a couple things happened. One was I began to open up with a joke. He loved to hear my jokes. I said, Joe, why do you like my jokes so much? And he said, because as soon as you start telling me, you start laughing, and then I start laughing. So I thought I'd tell you a couple of Joe jokes. A couple that he liked. So there's two guys in Berlin, 1937. And they're worried about Hitler, who's taking over the country. So one guy says to the other, I think we better get this guy before things get bad. So they found out that every day at 1 o'clock, Hitler came down the street in a cavalcade in an open car. So one of the guys found a grenade, and they hid it in a doorway. Next day, they're hiding in the doorway. 1 o'clock comes, no Hitler. 2 o'clock, no Hitler. 3 o'clock, no Hitler. Oh, well, I guess he's not coming. They go back the next day. Same thing happens. 1 o'clock, no Hitler. 2 o'clock, no Hitler. 3 o'clock. Finally, they go back the third day, and still no one's coming down the street. At the end of the day, one guy says to the other, God forbid something should have happened to him. Joe liked that joke. And the second joke is when I told him the day before he disappeared from the earth. I wondered whether I should or not, but he was fine. A man dies and goes to heaven. He gets to heaven and he meets God. He tells God a Holocaust joke. God nods his head and says, sorry, I don't get it. And the guy says, guess you had to be there. Thank you.
All right. Strong and strong. Now we're going to hear from Shannon Smith. Shannon Smith, you are called to the microphone. There we go.
Or did you want to stand? I have a chair if you want. Okay. I got a chair. Sure. And this guy here. And
sorry about that.
That's okay. Okay, good. And okay.
So I fell into the world of Mendelson Joe, which, as it's been spoken already, seems to be a bit of a common pattern. And now that I'm here, I don't see myself leaving. It's very interesting how my relationship with Mendelson kind of parallels Bob's relationship, where Bob is kind of my mentor. And so there's a bit of a multi-generational mentor tribute that I am offering today. So thank you. The melody is not the key to this song, it is the words. It is the words, it is the words, it is the words. So hear me now before I croak, because you'll be next. It is no joke. It is no joke, it is no joke, it is no joke. Canary in the coal mine I am. Canary in the coal mine I am. Canary in the coal mine I am. no one listens. When no one listens, when no one listens, when no one listens. It is my job, it is my truth. The words are sad, they are not couth. They are not couth, they are not couth, they are not couth. Canary in the coal mine I am. Canary in the coal mine I am. Canary in the coal mine I
All right, there has been some stories about Joe in the news, of course, and one article that was nicely written and respectful was from a good friend of all of ours, a man who's done so much for the music scene here in Toronto. And he's going to come up and say a word and maybe do a little quick impromptu thing at the piano. Please welcome Bill King to the microphone. Oh, also an author. I did this first. All right. Oh, perfect. Bill King at the piano.
Thanks so much, James. So Joe and I had this weird relationship because when I first came to Canada, it was because of the Vietnam War, and I didn't know the guy. And so Reiner Swartz had a radio show.
Yeah.
Reiner was on TV, and somebody mentioned, you know, to whoever was the guest, they had a favorite keyboard player, and they mentioned my name, and Joe lost it. He said, Americans should go home. And I said, who is this guy? I felt like this is quite the welcoming. And then I did like Joe. I would write the newspapers all the time, you know, because I saw a war going on here. I wrote about the Vietnam War, I wrote about Nixon, and I started seeing our letters showing up in the Star all the time. And then I thought, well, we got a mutual thing going on here. And then not long after, I signed with Capitol Records, and Mainline was coming out with Live at the Victory had been recorded, and they were having trouble. I had the same engineer working on my album, and he said, we're having trouble mixing this album. You want to take a crack at it? And I went, sure. I didn't think anything about it. So it was sort of the same time that Exile and Main Street came out, and I was thinking Rolling Stones. And when I heard the tracks, I went, yeah, I got to beef this up. This has got to be like, you know, Keith and Charlie Watts. And so I mixed it that way, and I gave it a lot of weight and everything, and I went away, and I said, this dude is going to love this, just love this. And so the next day I get this phone call, and he goes, Joe says, if you ever touch my music again, I will find you and kill you. So anyway, we didn't talk for many, many years, and then I think James hooked us up maybe about 6 years ago. And I thought, you know, maybe I should, I've done all the books of interviews with so many Canadian musicians and international artists, maybe I should talk to Joe. And Joe called me up and said, talk to me, out of nowhere. And I said, okay, so when do you want to do it? And he goes, now. I went, okay. So we started talking, and the conversation was just about art. And he expressed how much he appreciated how I wrote and talked to people and interviewed people, and he wanted me to talk to him that way. And so what we did was we talked art, and it was a very personal conversation, and the interview was wonderful. And then he asked me, he says, do you have a son? And I said, yes, I have a son. And he goes, I know of your son. Your son is a terrific musician. I said, you do? And he said, yes, he's a great musician. He goes, so what was your father like? And I explained to him what my father was like and the problems he had with World War II and PTSD. And he goes, well, I had issues with my father too. So we got into this father conversation. And he goes, so do you get along with him? And I said, well, he passed away. And I said, but I did make peace with him. And I said, I had a way to do it. And he goes, how'd you do this? And I said, rather than fight with your father, I thought I'd send him a book every month, something I read, so he could learn more about me. And he goes, that's ingenious. And I said, we kept this up until he passed away. And then the conversation, he goes, can you go back to that point about the father in the book? And I said, yeah. And he goes, that's ingenious. That was the last conversation we had. But anyway, I just want to play this in his behalf. This is a song I wrote called The River's Edge.
Thank you, Bill Kitty. Thank you so much. A lot of great musicians. We have a few more songs on this program. Drew Smith, come on down. You are the next Mendelson Joe friend on Joe's Tribute. By applause, how many people have received a letter or a postcard from Mendelson Joe? Just curious, don't mean to get dark here, how many people were told off in a letter or postcard by Mendelson Joe? Okay, well, I'm one of them, all right.
I had the honor of it happening on the phone.
So, yes, on the phone, I got it in a letter. I did make a mistake, and he is all forgiving. So it was all good. But I think it's cool. I think he probably saved Canada Post, single-handedly. I think that's the reason why I mean, I know what happened recently in the U.S. They actually tried to do away with the entire post office. Man, we need it. Hey! Oh, are you back? I like this. I don't know what's going to happen here.
Hold on a moment. Yeah, sure.
Well, I know a rare lady. She's a mother of 4. She got fired by the colonel for watching the sunset. She's an alien. She's an alien. She's an alien. She's an alien. Well, I know a rare man, and he's singing right to heart. And he sings with a passion. When he climbs on the door, he's an alien. He's an alien. He's an alien. He's an alien. It's the same old story, same old song. It makes no damn difference because he don't belong. They are aliens. They are aliens. They are aliens. They are aliens. Once lived with an angel, and she cried for the planet. Then she went down France just to pull down her pants. She's an alien. She's an alien. She's an alien. She's an alien. Well, I know a rare man, and he writes from his heart, and he takes with a passion. But it's not in fashion. He's an alien. He's an alien. He's an alien. He's an alien. It's the same old story, same old song. It makes no damn difference because he don't belong. Because he don't belong. They are aliens. They are aliens. We are aliens. They are
I'd like to bring out some of the band members here. Tony Quarington, Vezi Tayyeb, going to join me. I think George Koller could jump in for this one. This one is actually a bit of a sing-along. I think you all know Algonquin Park. There's a certain lake there. Yeah, there we go. And I actually asked that because I didn't want to mispronounce it. So thanks for covering for me. I always tell people how the sausages are made. It's my nature. This is a very famous Mendelson Joe song, and I'm going to introduce a singer that I have loved all my life. I sleep with this guy. I got such a kick out of him. Please welcome me. Thank you very much. Man. That guy is so gay. Here we go. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Yeah, so this is a Joe classic, and you are welcome to sing along in the chorus. It's so nice to be in Canada, in Canada, in Canada. It's so nice to be right here in Canada. Canada, my home away and native land. I have drank the waters in Lake Opeongo, but not Lake Ontario, not just yet. Well, a deputy sheriff bought me dinner in Rindy. That's in Alberta, that ain't Kettleby, but it still tasted nice. It's so nice to be in Canada, in Canada, in Canada. It's so nice to be right here in Canada, in Canada, my home and native land. I have heard the news and I got the blues in Wawa and Ottawa and in Hull. But there's one place that I miss and I do regret it. It ain't for credit. I miss South Dildo, Newfoundland. It's so nice. Oh, hey, hold on. Let's have a break. It's so nice to be in Canada, in Canada, in Canada. It's so nice to be right here in Canada, in Canada, my home and native land. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you too much. Thank you. Back to you, James. Thank you very much, James.
All right, James.
That should have been more awkward than it was right there. Passing the puck like I did. Oh boy. I'm glad to introduce this artist. She is a vocalist. She is now also an actress. Please welcome Honey Novick to the microphone.
First of all, I have to say, of course, thank you, Bobby, thank you, wherever you are. And Karen, I'm Honey. I tried to meet you beforehand. Anyway, I have to take my chances where it happens. So as James said, yes, I'm a vocalist. I've become a poet. A long time ago, James told me that's what I do. And I teach. Anyway, years ago, Joe wrote a song called Strugglesville. And I'm not going to sing it. I just wanted to tell you what he wrote. It was in 1995. Dear Honey, here's the lyrics for Strugglesville. Of the 300 or so songs I've penned, this is one of maybe a dozen I consider to be masterpiece quality. You're the only person ever to have shown an interest in this song. Another time, maybe something in the future. Anyway, in the interest of time, I wrote my experience. Okay, so, Mendelson Joe. I have to say, this is really very emotional for me, even though I'm enjoying it so much. Words of thank you can't suffice, so this story of appreciation will just have to do. I, too, am one of the working women. He called me singing teacher. I don't know where the portrait is. It was never in my possession. I was overwhelmed at the show. It was powerful. Joe, you have left the building, but the building is full of your words and art and all that you spawn. Thank you. James was right. I can write. This letter is shared with all your friends, but it is written to you. Wherever you are, Joe, I believe you can hear me. I've been silent for a long time, and now is the time to speak up and out. Thank you for everything you did for me, and you did a lot. The success in my work is the direct result of something you saw in me and then took action to help. Yes, you did the job. I can't remember when we first met or how, but I know it was in the early 1970s. I was struggling with kidney disease. I was actually dying. And you kept sending me gifts of encouragement, a belt, letters, pictures, etc. You even impressed my mother with your kind thoughtfulness, and the fact that your last name was Mendelson didn't hurt. But we weren't that kind of friends. We were friends of a certain vision. We helped people and we spoke out. When I was starting to feel better, I realized we were neighbors and visited as often as you invited. You didn't know what to do with my artistry, but you knew it was valid, and in time, you helped pave the way. The first great thing I remember is you booked recording time with me at Brock Fricker's, at his studio on Manning Avenue. I still have the cassette that you called Novickian Eclectica.
Wow! I didn't know that.
Well, that's where all that stuff came from that you know. Yeah, anyway, I'll get you a copy.
Well, I have it on cassette.
Yes, on cassette. Recorded at Brock Fricker's. It wasn't long after that you arranged to meet me in Bellwoods Park. When I got there, you asked me to sing all my songs a cappella. You told me then and there to do all my concerts without instruments. Well, not all. I did follow your advice, and it changed my life, artistically and personally. When I was invited to perform at the Oise Auditorium, which is huge, you were in the top tier trying to be anonymous. I didn't tell the audience there was a grand poobah in our midst and didn't point you out. From Eclectica, I went into researching obscure Yiddish music. At the same time, you received a Canada Council Award. You gave me $500 in support of my Yiddish music project and made me promise to tell no one. I was very good at that until now. Thank you. That magnum opus of mine is in libraries and in educational facilities, including Israel. You are listed as anonymous. You're actually not. You're with Leonard Cohen and Bob Dylan, but you deserve to be there. As I write this, I'm looking at your postcard offering me $200 in 1989 to model bare-chested for you. I wouldn't do it. It wasn't a nude thing. I mean, I'm an original Miss General Idea, so my nude is in the National Gallery and in the AGO. It was different. So I just couldn't do it. Anyway, was that the cause of our falling out? I don't know. You did invite me to Endale, but I couldn't get it together to go. You did reach out to me, reminding me that I did know what I did wrong. I still don't know, and now I never will, even though I can't imagine how horrible it was. I have a box of postcards, and letters. Excuse me, but the greatest thing you gave me is on the wall. It is a small painting of a red bird. I knew I could sing. I didn't know I could write. One day I took a workshop called Writing Out Loud. We were asked to write about a bird. Sorry.
Honey?
Yes.
Here, do you want that?
Thank you. I'm surprised my voice is back at all. Anyway, I used that painting when we were asked to write about a bird. What I said caused the whole room, maybe 30 or more people, to applaud. I immediately started to cry. The great teacher understood and befriended me and then mentored me. I'm published, Joe, and I still record, and I'm happy, and I survived my illness. You were there for me in the laughter and for justice. I will always love you. P.S. Joe, we each were friends with the artist Gail Geltner. She bought some of my poetry books and sent them to you. You wrote back and said, "Honey is a potent poet. You are a gift that just keeps on giving." And I just want to read to you, before I turn this microphone over, what Joe wrote to Gail. And beside what he said, "Thanks for your beautifully illustrated letter with Honey's beatniks. She's a potent poet. Practicing prophylactical and painting former Governor General Payette. Karen is the dream partner for me. Love you and love what she has, and love you to you from me." So I just wanted you all to hear that. Anyway.
All right, I'm not old-fashioned, but when I hear people coughing, I change the microphone. Just in case. Just in case.
You should.
Good. All right. Thank you, Honey Novick, everyone. Honey Novick. I actually got teary-eyed on that one. This is kind of like the end of that movie, Big Fish. When you go, he was friends with her and him and her and her. I had no idea that beautiful cassette tape that I've lived with for years, decades, was from Brock Fricker, thanks to Mendelson Joe. That is crazy. Let's welcome to the stage a performer who has been around, since the 80s. When I started, we were in the same clubs. And I am so excited to introduce Meryn Cadell to you right now and say a few words.
Lights. Hey, Rella. I applauded you when you brought the water, so it's all good. I have some notes. I probably don't need them. First of all, I want to say that I'm taller than this, so we'll fix that first. I also have a terrible, strange cough, not unlike Honey. And hopefully I won't be letting you know about it. Though I have been coughing for hours.
Uh-oh. A new mic.
How many mics have you got? Yeah, really, how many mics? In between sets, in between performers, James is dipping them in that solution. Remember the barbers had the thing with Barbasol? Yes, it said Barbasol. So.
Just in case.
Oh, thank you. I actually have, thank you very much.
Yes.
I did. And a beer. First of all, I love this room. I really love the energy and the people in this room. It's just, Toronto is such an incredibly special place. And when I was writing what I was going to say tonight, I was kind of thinking about like the young people that I might have to try to explain something to, and I thought, there's not going to be any young people. But what there's going to be is not old people, but you all, right? Like this, I really feel like, well, I know that elderly and pension age has disappeared in the last, I don't know, decade or 2 decades. Because we are all alive and thriving, and age has little to do with who we are or what we do, which I think is fucking amazing. And I'm sure Joe loved it as well. Joe was certainly older than me, and an early thing that I learned about him, that I realized he was older, and I had such a young person's perspective on it, was that, excuse me, just, I'm gonna do that a lot.
Have you tested?
I have tested, and thank you for asking that. I have tested, and I'm not positive. Well, I wasn't positive earlier today. So I met Mendelson Joe, or met him. I'm not even sure when I physically met him, but we became connected from him sending one of his incredible letters / postcards, as he did to so many people. I think probably through Bob Wiseman, he heard, or maybe just whatever, he heard my first album and loved it, and was always very appreciative and very complimentary about my work. I was going to say content. Oh my God, what have I become? Anyway, so yeah, I got these great letters from M. Joe, which were always colorful and beautiful and amazing. And so that would have been was my first album, and then when my second album, Bombazine, came out, he sent me again a glowing. He was incredibly positive and incredibly encouraging to me. But he also said, "Stop making the text so small for the lyrics. I can't even read it." And part of me just thought, I mean, literally, I don't know what I was, or around the orbit of 30, I thought, that's weird. Like, I just didn't acknowledge that people get older and their eyes change. I don't know. Oh, thank you. Actually, Marcus just gave me, O'Hara gave me something as well, and my mouth is just dry as well. I thought about that recently. I thought, are bones dry? And then I thought, I don't want to know. That's what's really good. Anyway, so what I was going to tell you is, the main in-person interaction I had with Joe was he asked to paint my portrait, and I agreed, which in some ways is kind of odd because I was already a caricature. That's sort of how I did what I did. I was fairly well known in the 90s for the kids who weren't around then. And it was quite Warholian when I look back at it. The bleached white hair and the kind of, like I literally wanted to make a portrait of myself, like a portrait for an artist, whatever, where it was just a white styrofoam head and my blonde wig like pinned on the top of it. Because that's sort of what I felt like and what I was. What I didn't know until much later was that I was all the things I already was, but I was also a guy. And that would just make it easier to live and be. And one of the things that I regret, or feel, not remorse, but I wish I'd known Joe during the years since my transition, and I didn't. And years after, I think he phoned me when I was living in Vancouver and I was hired to the faculty of UBC, University of British Columbia, in Vancouver in the creative writing program, which was a great idea that has gone horribly sour and wrong, but that's a different story. Way later I thought, oh my God, was the guy with the strange voice who said, "I want to talk to the doctor," obviously it was a voicemail, and then left the phone number, and I thought, I don't know what that is. I didn't save it, I didn't. And it was, I'm almost certain, hi Bob, I'm almost certain it was Joe reaching out in that way because I've become a professor even though I don't have a doctorate. So yes, I lost touch with him. But the main kind of interaction that I had with him that I remember most strongly, water moment. So one of the cool things about being transgender is that for many people, there's the opportunity, or for me, let's just talk about me, is the opportunity to see the world through two lenses, if not more. You know, just the way that one is a woman and the way that one is a man and how that's perceived in the world. I've had many interesting cab rides and Uber rides that are just like, wow, if you only knew my history, it would be so different what you're checking right now. And not always in a negative way, but so so Joe asked me if I would pose for a portrait, and I didn't really think twice about it. I guess I did say that he wrote to me a lot, but what he wrote to me was just like clearly an artist who understood my artistry, and so I kind of loved him immediately. There was no question of that. So when he asked to paint my portrait, I didn't think for a second. I said I would love to do that. I was photographed a lot, and as I said, I had this whole, I didn't think of it at that time as being Warholian or as being a mask of any kind, but when I look back, it's like, oh, yes, it was. But, so then we go and I sit to be the subject of this portrait, and it's a very intimate process in a sense. It's two people in a room where there's discussion going on to a certain degree, but one person is meant to be as still as possible, and while you're talking, you also shouldn't move a lot or do anything insane. And so we did that, and I hadn't really thought much even about like how he would picture me or how he would see me. Sorry. But one of the things that I hadn't even considered before I did it, and I didn't consider it most of my life, and I don't really consider it now, is that I have marks on my face, on my chin area, that look, people have called them frown lines, but what they actually are syringe marks, which is really weird, I know, and kind of gross. And the first thing I want to clear up is that they're not syringe marks by drug. It was nothing to do with drugs. It was to do with a quite successful dermatologist in my hometown who really marred the faces of many people of my age group, which is kind of a drag. But I lived with them, and and I didn't live with a lot of, they bothered me, but at the same time, you take your face wherever you go. There isn't a lot of, you gotta kind of live with your face. So I did, and I wasn't that, I guess I could have worn a veil all the time or something, but that's not what I chose to do. So two things about Richard Nixon. Two things about that session. We were in his studio on Ossington Avenue, and I had never been alone with him. And he was a person, I hope I'm not, I guess other people will tell me if they feel differently or feel that it's wrong. Obviously, he was a person with opinions. He had a lot of opinions. He was extremely passionate. But he was also, as a woman, I found his energy to be very powerful, and the kind of powerful that if he had had the choice to be, he could have been very violent and very destructive. That was clearly not his choice and not the way he moved in the world. But that was really interesting, because you're sitting for a portrait, it's an extremely intimate and powerful thing. Like, I don't know if I would do it again. I probably would, but it's fascinating to kind of be there and witness that happening. And we talked, I'm sure we talked about, I don't remember anything about the conversation. And I don't think we laughed a lot because laughing often involves like, and you know, you don't want to do that when you're having the portrait drawn, painted. Anyway, it hadn't occurred to me until it was actually happening whether he would draw the lines on my face, and I thought, well, I guess I'll find out when I see it. And this is kind of the last thing that I want to share about Mendelson Joe, our M. Joe, is that when he was finished, he said, because he did them all, in, well, as far as I know, he did mine in one go.
Hour and 15 minutes.
Oh, did he have a time? Okay, so it was an hour and 15 minutes, he had time. And then he said, let's go out and see it in natural light. So, and what's so funny to me about, just thinking about Mendelson Joe in his studio, which was a garage on Ossington, just north of Queen, when Chem H wasn't Chem H at all, actually, it wasn't even called that. That whole area was so just like devoid of any character. So then when I think of this like blonde Warhol person and M. Joe, who had this incredible, I'm sure it's been talked about in their photographs of it, like he wore coveralls usually with cut-offs, so they were shorts with paint everywhere, and then like workmen's socks and boots. So we emerged from his, and it didn't look like a house, it wouldn't have looked like anyone lived there. So we emerged from that, and we're standing out in front looking at this painting, and I just remember thinking, I can't imagine quite what this would look like to other people, but I fucking love that it's happening. So there we were looking at this portrait, and yeah, I was very glad to see it. I was very glad that he asked me to do it, and when I think about who he was and what he was like, you know, he could almost be hectoring in his letters to the editor and that kind of thing, but he was always the same thing, which was not this. I take that back. It was truth. He really wanted truth. He treasured more than anything the idea that whatever's happening should not be covered in any kind of patina of fakery or anything else. And also, I mean, I don't know if I said this earlier, I found him when he started to write to me when my first album came out, like an elder. Like he was just someone who just, without even really thinking about it, showered me with knowledge of how, or not how to be, he wasn't doing that. It was more like he was confirming to me that how I might be living was on the right path, kind of thing. Anyway, I was extremely glad to know him, and I think he was a remarkable guy, filled with imperfections and flaws, which he was more than happy to acknowledge and share and incorporate into his message of being. And I also love that he made music until he was like, yeah, I've made my music now. Which actually, when I'm saying this now, I realize that's also kind of what I did. But he did what pleased him from the beginning to the end, and I was so moved to hear that he chose his exit, and that it could be so simple and supported and not some kind of conflagration. Just seems so Joe, and I love that that happened for him. And I hope he's somewhere in the room in some way. But he was an amazing guy. He was an amazing man, and I'm glad that I got to be in some way part of the large orbit that made Mendelson Joe.
keep one. That hasn't been touched yet, in case.
Yeah.
But.
Change the mic out.
There we go. Oh, okay. Oh, here we go. All right. Folks, there was a handful of people whenever I saw Joe. He always really supported a handful of people. Like, whenever we talk about music, he would talk about Bobby Wiseman. Whenever we talk about writing poetry, round of applause for Bobby Wiseman. Also, he would talk about the type of men he admired, that he could put up with, or at least enjoy their company. And this is one of them. He is called the People's Poet. Please welcome Robert Priest to the microphone with a beautiful, beautiful poem.
Greetings. I'm going to take my mask off. I just, to be friendly, but also I want you to see my teeth.
Great teeth. Great teeth.
These teeth, they wouldn't be here, but Mr. Joe, he traded great big paintings. When my teeth were crumbling, they was like, one goes and then the next goes and that weakens the rest and they start to go and suddenly you feel like Chester from Gunsmoke. It's an old reference. Anyway, he gave me many things and I won't list them here because there's been many accounts of his incredible generosity, his mentorship of many people. The greatest thing I feel he did give me though was his art. It's just undeniably moving. For me, especially his landscapes. I was sick for a long time, and he was very gently kind to my dear partner, Marcia Kersner, when she was left alone for so long, and he just called her up and buoyed her, and who could not love the guy? So I knew he was going. Oh, we just want you to know that after he passed, maybe 3 days later, we got a postcard from him. And that was quite lovely. And in it he said, "Until we reconvene." Anyway, I wrote this, I knew what time he was going, and I wrote this at that time. Just called Mr. Joe. Remembering all the love you gruffly gave, that great foot making the earth keep the beat, shaking the house with song, taking twilight out of the sky, fastening it a night at a time to whatever you choose as canvas. Gentle with the brush, but blunt with fools, your wicked laugh as you paint some earth-defiling liar's face in asshole caricature. Too bad to lose the pain, you have to lose the whole world, and Karen too. Your voice broken, your hands too shaky for brush or guitar. But death can't have all of you. Your voice, those elegant riffs in vinyl grooves, a sky more beautiful than sky can ever be. The same sky that pressed down, that bound you, powerless to do anything but take yourself out of it. A hole in the air where you disappeared. A Joe-shaped hole of a man flying free again, threading the needle, shaking off the Parkinson's like an outgrown cloak. It won't take much to make me think of you. A forest made beautiful by dawn, breasts, bikes, bird wings anywhere, but twilight most of all. To gaze up into that indigo so often pulled down through your brush and beauty I'd have missed but for you. Look, it's an M. Joe sky. 10-4.
Friendly Rich would you please make your way to the stage? Friendly Rich drove out to be painted or interviewed. I know that you drove out there. I heard a great podcast. Yeah. And Joe, when I interviewed him, he said, "You're smart. You brought a driver. You had to drive yourself." Are you ready? I'm giving you your own mic.
Sure.
Friendly Rich, everybody.
Hi, everyone. I'll be quick here. I'll be quick. I got Joe's guitar on the ground. Yeah. Showing a little disrespect, I guess. Joe and I got along real great because I think, like, he found me on the CBC as he found all of you. And someone has to shout out against Pierre Polyev. Yeah, so I'm just warming up. We have to carry the torch. This is it here, eh? The torch. And I'm gonna plug it in now, Colin. Okay. All right. What does it sound like, Colin? It sounds like Joe's guitar, but played poorly by me. But hey, I'm not here to shit on myself. Listen. Love the man, gonna miss him. But we did get along great, and I think part of it was because like I was a curmudgeon when I was like 12, so he kind of taught me, this song spoke to me. You hear that okay? I can't hear. Crank me up in the monitor. I want to hear Mendelson Joe play this song for me. I was driving with my friend in his Porsche. They are a work of art. Then he lowered his window and threw out an empty pop can. What a statement. Humans bug me. Humans bug me. My next door neighbor, he's a liar, pardon me. He's a real estate broker. Ledger of ledger, he dyes his hair to camouflage his true colors. Sing it. Humans bug me. Humans bug me. Humans bug me. Humans. Macho morons with tattoos, they walk their pit bulls. They wanna be tough guys. Fouling sidewalks but never theirs. I say leash the men and not the doggies. Humans bug me. Humans bug me. Humans bug me. Humans. Don't diddy don't diddy don't. Diddy don't don't. Diddy do diddy don't. All right. This one's for Pierre Polyev, not you, Michal. Politicians dance a dirty dance of deception. I mean democracy. Of the rich, by the rich, for the rich, to keep the stupid stupid. Everybody, humans bug me. Humans bug me. Humans bug me. That's it. Of all the creatures on this earth, there's nothing lower than a human. Humans bug me. Humans bug Watch what I do here. Humans bug me. Mute the mic. Mute the mic. Mute the mic. Humans bug me. Mute the guitar. That was on
Well, that happened.
I love that. Friendly Rich, everybody. One more round of applause. I don't know if CBC are playing Friendly Rich, but I play him on my show, Jazz Gone Wild, Jazz FM 91. I play the heck out of that guy. Hey, how about Stan the Fan? Are you going to come up and say a word? Yes, he has traveled many a mile to come and praise the man known as M. Joe. This guy knows Joe. Yes, Stan.
Joe knew me as Stan the Fan, and I was involved with Joe since about 1970. I was 14 years old, and I got drunk with my friend Wayne at his house in Willowdale, and his brother gave us this album called Stink. And we played it, and we cranked it, and it was great. And then I started buying all of his albums, and I followed his career. And I saw when he changed his name from Joe Mendelson to Mr. Middle of the Road. Then he changed his name to Mr. Middle of the Road. Then he changed his name to Mendelson Joe. And at a concert in 1983 at the Bamboo Club, it was for the Stony Plain Sampler. A bunch of great artists were on the Stony Plain album, and Joe was there, and he walked by my table, and I said, Mendelson Joe. And he came right over, and I said, you don't know me, but I'm a fan of yours, and I would really like to write you a letter. So he gave me his address, so I started writing him letters. And we wrote so many letters back and forth. And eventually, I became sort of a promoter, or what he called a pimp. Right? I was his pimp, in a way. You know, I bought a painting off him on time. It was one of his first 10 paintings. It was called Belt Maker, named after the song Belt Maker. I have it on my wall in Coldwater in my house. I've got 14 of his paintings. Belt Maker's on the wall. It's a picture of him making a belt. And it's from 1975. It's got his full name, Joe Mendelson, on there. Right? That was 1975, just before he changed his name. So I also have the belt. He made me a belt that fit me. Then, doesn't fit me anymore. It's on the wall next to the painting. And then I have the single Belt Maker, and I put that on the wall next to the painting. It looks really good. So over time, and I bought that painting, and I paid him $35 a month. And every month they'd send him the check in the mail, and I'd write a little message on the check where they had a comment section, and he'd write something back on the endorsement part on the back. We communicated that way. So I got 12 scrapbooks at home with hundreds of letters that I wrote on his behalf, or I wrote to him and he wrote back to me, and I wrote to all kinds of famous people promoting him. So I'm going to give you a couple anecdotes of things that I did that, to promote him that were successful. One of them involved Mayor Barbara Hall. I nominated him for the William P. Hubbard Award because he co-founded the Artists Against Racism. I should have nominated also his partner, Lisa Cherniak. I didn't, because my whole thing was I'm promoting Joe. Joe didn't want awards. He wasn't looking for an award. The name of the game ain't schmaltz, it's results. He wanted to fight racism. He didn't care about getting an award. But to me, I wanted the publicity for him so that he could get through to more people. The more publicity he gets, the more he gets through to people. So I nominated him. I got June Callwood to endorse my nomination, and it got there. So I got invited to the rotunda of the City Hall on the March 6, 1995, the Civic Awards Day. And I call it the saucer section of the City Hall. It's like the saucer section, Star Trek. So I went there, and it was a very well-heeled crowd. People were dressed really nice. The Lieutenant Governor General, I think Hugh Jackman, he was there. Mayor Barbara Hall was there. A lot of other dignitaries, and there was some school children in the audience. And so when it was Joe's turn to come on the stage, it was very funny because of the juxtaposition of Joe coming out on the stage with the cut-off shorts splattered with paint, and his paint-splattered motorcycle helmet and the shorts and everything. So, and all these well-heeled people, you know, the Lieutenant Governor General hands him the award, and he started his speech, and it was wonderful. At first, you know, he said the speech, and he got a standing ovation, so he got emboldened. And then he went and he said, well, in my opinion, a lot of people are, in their natural state, assholes. And as soon as he said that, there was a gasp, an audible gasp from the crowd. The mayor frowned, the Lieutenant Governor General scowled, the children tittered, It was quite a moment. So the next day, on the Toronto Star front page, Joe gives the mayor the bum's rush. So I went and saw Joe a little while after that at his studio, and I was in Tin, which I was there a lot of times. And he said, he gave me the award. He said, you won this award because you got me $1 million worth of publicity. Right? So I still have that award sitting on my shelf. It says March 6, 1995. Another one was when he got his $40,000 art grant from the Canada Council, which is a government group, right? And he made the series called Liars, right? With the asshole faces of all these politicians, especially Brian Mulroney. So, so I wrote a letter to Adrienne Clarkson and suggested that she do a feature on Joe. So she said, she wrote me back, and I have the letter, and it says, I'm going to do it. So she sent a camera crew from the CBC. They followed Joe around for a week in Toronto, culminating in a concert he did on Spadina Avenue. Mayor Hall was there, with Colin Vaughan sitting next to you, and Geddy Lee was sitting right next to me. I was so, my wife couldn't talk, right? She was a fan of Rush, right? So, and there was Joe doing his songs, and the camera comes in and films the big asshole painting. So a couple weeks later, it says in the TV guide, Toronto Star TV guide, Mendelson Joe on Adrienne Clarkson presents. So I put the VCR tape in, the VHS, and I was going to tape it, and they cut the thing. So I believe, I don't have proof, but I believe Mulroney's office interfered. He didn't like the idea that a Canadian council gives this guy $40,000 to do a painting of him as an asshole, and then the CBC is going to come, and they're going to apologize for so much. So that was one. Another one was an ongoing feud I had with the Art Gallery of Ontario. I kept writing to the curators, and I'd go in there and I'd talk to them, say, look, you know, you've got this huge gallery, you've got a big giant hamburger, you've got all kind of weird art. We've got these artists in Toronto who, they are great artists and they just need the Ontario Art Gallery of Ontario. It just makes sense to me that you would have one small gallery with a rotating group of paintings by Toronto artists. Can you do that? Well, there are plenty of small galleries on Dundas Street that he can go to. We're the Art Gallery of Ontario. And I go, you're just a bunch of elitist snobs, like somebody else said tonight. So I wrote lots of letters to the Now magazine saying the same thing, and then other people joined in, and we had a good time nailing the Art Gallery of Ontario for their elitism, because they still seem to be like that. And it's unfortunate that a Mendelson Joe or a Van Gogh of his time, you know, is ignored by the art groups and everything. If you're established, they push you, but if you're up and coming and you're great, they ignore you until you're dead. Well, I'm sorry, you know, and I'm really sorry that Joe's dead. I'll never write a letter again that says, Dear Mr. Joe. I wrote hundreds of them, and I got one the day he died. And I got another one where he still had his wit, even though he was shaking and everything. And on the last letter that I got from him, the last postcard, he said he said something very funny. I mentioned that, oh, that Doug Ford really bugs me, right? And he said, well, I painted him in the holy tradition. And we all know what that means. When Bob Ray was the premier, thank you, I need that. I'm an archivist for Joe. I have 12 scrapbooks full of all kinds of stuff. I've got all his albums, I've got 14 of his paintings, I've got mainline posters, I've got everything. If somebody here wants to do a documentary film, you got to come and see me. So I've got the material, and I've got lots of video footage and stuff too. So anyway, I was on that vein about the Bob Ray, right? So Bob Ray was, when he was the outgoing premier, I wrote him a letter, said, I understand that when the premier is outgoing, they let you commission a portrait, put it in the Ontario legislature. So I suggest Mendelson Joe would be a great portrait for you, Mr. Ray. He wrote me back, he was very polite. I think he was scared. You know, a lot of politicians are scared of Joe. But Joe respected Bob Ray, and Bob Ray's a respectable guy. He would have done a great job. He would have been the best painting in the legislature. So on that last thing I'm going to say about it is, when he said he painted Doug Ford in the holy tradition, I believe Doug Ford's painting should be on the legislature with the big asshole. And that's all I'm going to say.
Wow. How about another round of applause for Bobby Wiseman, because he put this list together, and you knew to put Stan the Man near the end of this. Who knew? That's amazing stories. And now an artist that needs no introduction, but that's why I'm here. He does so much interesting art and music and was very close to Joe. John Oswald, come on down. John Oswald. With the saxophone.
Yeah, I might be the only person in the room that would take exception with Bob's set list because who can follow Stan the Man? That was great. How many of you, who's ever seen, what? Closer to the mic?
Yeah.
Okay. Canadian Bandstand. Does anybody remember Canadian Bandstand? Came out of Kitchener. I first encountered Joe on Canadian Bandstand. I was there. It was across from our high school, CKCO TV, it's across the street. And on Friday nights we would go to the studio and we would dance on Canadian Bandstand. And on very rare occasions they would bring in an act, which would always, the act would always lip sync and finger sync to their hit song. So around 1969 or 1970, sorry Joe about my imprecision, the band was McKenna Mendelson Mainline, and they were finger syncing and lip syncing. They were really emphasizing that. The guitar player had his cord tied around the cymbal, and the drummer was kind of doing air drums, except for Joe. What the audience would see and hear on TV, and that would be the next afternoon we watched this, was this guy who didn't seem to know what the song was because his mouth was moving at all sorts of different times to what was coming out of the speakers of your TV set. But what we experienced in the studio was Joe was singing the song, but he was singing it independent of the recorded track that they were playing very quietly in the studio and playing the harmonica. And my very strong impression at the time was, hey, this guy's the real deal. Because he was singing to us, mostly high school kids who were in the audience. He wasn't singing to the non-reality beyond that. It was quite fantastic. 20 years later, I got to dance with Joe. Maya was singing that song before and mentioning Swan Lake and everything. Well, we did get to dance, but in between that, halfway in between that, I was the engineer for an album. Joe asked me to record him solo. He's going to make a solo album. He hadn't done this before, and this, I think, was just after he had switched his name around. And the album was called Not Safe. And sorry, I'm just doing a little bit of planning here. Before I introduce the song from Not Safe that Bob Wiseman and I are going to play, I'm going to introduce Bob Wiseman again because he just told me a couple minutes ago that he didn't want to play this thing, which was the last thing that he played for Mendelson Joe, over the phone. Joe responded in tremendous ways. He was hooting over the phone while Bob was playing this thing and said something, I can't quote what he said because I don't remember exactly what it was, but anyways, Joe loved it. And Bob, being a very shy guy, didn't want to play this thing, but I think if you encourage him, he'll play this piece. Bob wants the composition. Okay. I hit it, Bob. Okay. Yeah, hit it. He played this on my piano yesterday, and he managed to break one of the
yeah. Okay. I'll explain a bit about that. I'll just try to quickly explain. In my last conversation with Joe, and I'm so grateful I was able to say goodbye to him, we had a really nice talk about stuff, and Joe made a lot of presents to me, and I hope he felt like I made some to him too, and he was a great supporter in my life, like no one else. And anyways, at a certain point, I said to him, "Can I play you something on the piano?" Because I started writing melodic classical music, and he was freaking out. I put the phone in front of the piano, and I could hear him screaming, like he was just loving it, like yes, go. And the second last thing he did for me,
Perfect audience for a classical piece.
I explained to him after I finished the piece and we spoke a bit that I'm self-taught. I'm just an idiot. I don't really know what I'm doing. That's part of what my pleasure is in trying to write this music. And I haven't had a name for this thing for a couple of years. And he was like, "That's your name. You got it. It's right there. It's the idiot." And I thought, yes, that's right. That's what I'm calling the piece from now on. Is the idiot.
So Bob was the idiot, and Joe, on many occasions, called me a wanker because of the kind of music that Bob and I have been playing together for 30 years now. Free improvised music. And for some reason, although he was very dismissive of this wanker music, he had me do a little bit of wanking on a couple of his albums. And so I hope you don't mind what's going to happen now. This is from the album I recorded of him, in which he played vocals, overdubbed guitars, 2 guitars, some very tasteful drums, and foot. I think the one thing I really think I accomplished in that was I really got the foot. And this is one of the songs from him called Addicted. Show off my reeds, clear plastic reeds, made in 1946, the first vacuum plastic product in the United States of America. This is just a second, more than a second.
I'm addicted.
Yes, I'm addicted.
lock me in a padded cell, but give me cold turkey, smoked turkey.
Thank you very much. As Jaymz Bee comes back on the stage, I didn't finish the little thing about the dance that Joe and I did. It was to Tchaikovsky, the two of us dancing on stage and something. And if you're wondering about that, just ask Jaymz Bee, and he will send you to this place called YouTube. Because you haven't got that to see, do you?
Yes, I do after this. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm going to get out of the way.
All right. John Oswald, everybody. This reminds me to remind you that we have one more beautiful song to go. And then a short video, about 12 minutes long, of little bits of Joe, and you'll see pretty much everything somebody said here is encapsulated in one piece, including a little bit of him dancing the Swan Ballet in a tutu. So that's coming up in a few minutes, including the Shirley Show, including a bunch of the things we've heard about. I should also mention some people couldn't make it, but they are huge fans. And I can tell you, Geddy Lee, Jeannie Becker, and Moses Neimer are huge fans of Joe. Jeannie interviewed him 3 times and said that man wasn't about fashion, that man was about style. Moses bought 6 self-portraits and a whole bunch of others. He's got a huge collection, not as big as Stan the Fan, but still. Okay, when I interviewed Joe, and that's also on YouTube, if you look up Mendelson Joe Jaymz Bee, we had a beautiful hour talking about absolutely everything. And before the interview, I got a chance to ask him about this man. And Joe said, I hated Hollywood, but I love John Finley. This is John Finley, everybody.
Mendelson Joe. Well, I spent a lot of my life in that other country. It's right south of us. And but I was back here for about a year and a half, and that's when I met Joe. That was like in '71. So let's see, Mr. Middle of the Road. Oh, he sent me tapes. We exchanged tapes and stuff. Mr. Middle of the Road. Brain damage. Normal. I think I'm losing my marbles. It's mainly because of the meat. And I remember at that point, I went to his place on Ossington, and he had this painting up there, and it was this big head. But the bottom half was big where the mouth was, and the top part was tiny. And it was a self-portrait. And he called it Big Mouth, Small Brain. I gotta show you something. Two things. So Joe and I wrote a song together, but first of all, I gotta show you. After we wrote the song, Joe made this for me. And it's forever. So, we wrote this song in the mid-70s when he... So the story. Okay, right. There's this good story. So, Monday nights at the Troubadour. And it's kind of open mic night. And so, I got Joe in to do it. He was going to go do 4 tunes. And you know Joe, he's dry as the Gobi Desert. And you can never tell whether it's serious or whether he's being funny. And so he gets up there on the stage and he says, well, I got this song, I'm going to sing it. And he just is like, you know, he's Joe. And the place laughed. They weren't laughing at him. They thought he was the funniest thing they'd ever seen, that he was a comedy act. And he did his songs, and the lines in the songs, they'd laugh. And then he'd talk between the songs, and they were falling out. And Joe was just being Joe. And I think he hated it, you know, because he was just singing his songs. And I think that if he could have been a big hit. But then again, he couldn't be because, you know, the world wasn't ready for him. So Joe and I wrote this tune, and it has sat and hasn't really done anything until right now. And it's been like, it's getting near 50 years, 45, 50 years. And, you know, I always did the image of Joe as this big guy with his boots and his painted, that stuff, you know, and his motorcycle. And I went riding on the back with him in his motorcycle. He always had a big helmet. He had a big one for me. Anyway, but Joe, I look at this lyric now, and we're just writing song. And I've been going over it the last couple of days. It is so sweet. Joe's heart. Joe had the sweetest heart. Maybe Karen knows. And I guess you all know because you love him and you know him. His heart was just, and he had this big tough thing on the outside, and inside it was just, oh man. This lyric is just, anyway, I'm known, I could have if I had an indigenous name, it would be Forgets Words Well. So, I'm going to have this in front of me. I swear I've been singing for the last couple of days at home, and I know it, but I know that I don't know it. And so I could forget a line at any point and then go, wonk. So I got it right here, just in case I screw up. I can jump back to it. And I'm thinking that on those charts, you know the place that goes da 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 da. Instead, that'll be my count in, and we will do it a cappella. I mean, a rubato, because it's sweet, you know. When the shadows fall and your eyes meet mine, oh, I taste your lips, and suddenly I find 2, 3, there's time for love, sweet love. 1, 2, 3, 4. When the moon's on the rise and the shadows realize it's time for sleeping, midnight creeping, it's time for love, sweet love. When the stars light up the sky, no one knows shadows fall and your eyes meet mine, oh, I taste your lips and suddenly I find it's time for love, sweet love, yeah. When the sun peeks through the blinds, we are one side by side. Oh, what a feeling, I'm just feeling. It's time for love, oh sweet love. No one knows why the wind blows. Nobody knows how love grows. I said one more time, you're the season, she's the reason. It's time for love, oh sweet love. When the shadows fall and your eyes meet mine, oh, I taste your lips and suddenly I find it's time for love, sweet love. Oh yes it is. Ooh, oh what a feeling, I'm just reeling. Yes, I smooch. I'm gonna hoochie coochie, gonna love, sweet love. Oh, love, 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 sweet love. I'm fooling. Oh, no, it's cooling. I wanna smooch ya, hoochie coochie all night long. I'm gonna smooch ya, hoochie coochie all night long. It's time for love, sweet love. Hey, it's always time for love, sweet love. I just don't wanna shoot ya and hug ya and kiss ya all night long, smooch ya and hooch ya, hoochie coochie, oh yeah, oh it's time. Oh Joe, yeah, it's time for love, sweet love.
John Finley, everybody. Gonna have this video set up in a few seconds. Another round of applause for this beautiful band.